My question comes from a point you made that fundamentally governments and companies operate on growth. You know, whether it be you're elected because you vote because you have a good job, or a shareholder because a company has delivered extra dividend. So how do we change that idea, which to me is so embedded in everything that we do?
I mean, it is it's the $60 trillion question in terms of the size of the global economy, right? How do we stop growth? How do we change that model? The answer is we're not going to have to, because it's going to stop by itself. This is a really important point. We're not going to decide to stop growing the economy. Right? The economy is going to stop growing all by itself because it's had enough. Right? It's looked at the world and said, it ain't going to work for me anymore. Right? And therefore, the physics and biology say, we're not going to grow this economy any more than it currently is, because you can't do that. Right? And so I don't mean that in a sense of flippantly, I mean back to the physics and biology. We cannot grow the economy in this model this way. So either, let's think about that, my very big problem times 1.5 and times 3. What can we change? Population, very difficult to change. You can change it, but it takes decades to have an influence. You need to grow the economy, which was looking to be quite difficult, and you need to educate women, right, which just takes time. So we're not going to change we're not going to change population growth significantly in a meaningful time frame. So we can't fix that. We can change per capita income. We can stop growing the economy consciously. That's not going to happen for the reasons you're saying. We're not going to decide to do that. Right? We may do that. We're not going to decide to do it. Or we can change the very big problem, which is the nature of the economy. So we're now up against this limit, and we're going to have to change a very big problem. We're going to have to change the way we produce energy, what technologies we use, how much we shop, how much stuff we own. And if we don't change that, the economy can't grow anymore. Now, the economy's growth is not limited by the size of the money. Right? We can have a $300 trillion GWP economy. That's not a problem. What we can't have is the resource consumption that is embedded in that. Right? So there's no reason we can't grow an economy in theory, but we can't grow it unless we change the model in which it's based. And we're not going to change that in a hurry because we haven't got time to change that in a hurry. Because we're up against, we could have changed it in 1972 when the limits of growth came out and said, yep, you're right, sorry, okay, we'll change the model. We didn't. Right? We could have in 1990, possibly. We sure as hell can't now. It won't change fast enough to stop that situation. So rest easy, it will stop growing all by itself. A lot of CEOs will get sacked in the meantime. Governments will be thrown out. It's going to be kind of messy, but that's going to happen. Who's there first? You were.
I was going to ask you, I know that you're virtually indicating some cynicism about organisational change en masse in terms of your position or your own statement about Greenpeace. In terms of political parties, also working within political parties, I assume that you'll feel that there's certain limitations there. So from a political point of view and a strategic point of view, are you advocating that it's much more up to the individual and the lifestyle that we live and adopt? Or are you saying that there are broader political strategies which you'd like to share with us?
Yep, sure. No, good, thank you. First of all, clarifying Greenpeace. I'm extremely proud of Greenpeace. It's the best thing I ever did in my life. I have great passion for the organisation, and they are stuck in their ways as a Ford Motor Company. Right? So it's just the nature of large organisations that they're very hard to change. Right? But it's not a bad organisation, it's just people. Right? And we're all kind of stuck in that place. What I'm saying is that it's not up to the individual, let governments off the hook. Right? It's not about communities acting because business won't and we should ignore them. It's about people. It's about people in politics. It's about people in business. It's about people in NGOs and people in academics and people in lecture halls. It's about people in everywhere you look. I have a completely non-ideological view of the world in terms of organisational form. And I went from Greenpeace to running a company. Everyone thought I'd sold out because I was working for my own company. Because it was a company, therefore it was evil. Right? There are as many evil people in Greenpeace as there are in many companies. And there aren't many, by the way, at all. I don't mean that in that way. It's just about people. So it is about people. And it's about culture change happening from people's values and beliefs, not from the top down being organised. So we get the leaders we deserve and we elect. We get the companies and the products that we ask for, right? And we have to ask for different things. So that political movement, though, I do believe the only real direct response in terms of politics is they're going to respond to us. Right? We are not going to respond to them. right? We are going to demand change and they're going to give it to us. And it won't happen by demanding that a company, which I've spent 15 years trying to do, behave in a way which the customer doesn't want. Right? You have to have that coming from the bottom up, so we have to organise ourselves through movements and social change organisations, not to change politics, right, which we've been trying to do for 30 years unsuccessfully, but to change ourselves. There is a very important question, and the issue is that, just in a technical sense, of positive feedbacks, we know what they are. Sea ice melts, blue water absorbs heat rather than white ice reflecting heat, therefore the system feeds upon itself and sort of heats up. So I've just spent the last 3 months working on a paper on this, on how you would actually do it, right? So this is a hot topic for me. We're going to have to change at a rate and at a scale that currently seems to us completely incomprehensible for the reasons you're saying. Right? We're going to have to, those of you who are familiar with climate change science, we talk about 450 parts per million as being the upper limit we can get to achieve 2 degrees of warming, which is the maximum we can cope with. I mean, just think about the logic of this, right? This is a strategy which gives us a 50-50 chance of not passing 2 degrees. Right? 50-50 chance of not passing 2 degrees. 2 degrees is the point where we think the system takes over and warms itself beyond belief. Right? Potentially. We don't know that, but we think there's a danger of that and therefore it's a significant risk. So our solution is to give ourselves a 50-50 chance of success. Imagine Winston Churchill getting and saying, I've got a strategy to defeat Hitler. Right? We're going to put everything we've got at it, and there's a 50-50 chance that he'll be your government in 3 years' time, but we think there's a reasonable chance, and any more than that would cost too much. Right? And you wouldn't want to sacrifice your window shades or the number of bedrooms in your house for that 50% chance, so we're just going to give them a 50-50 chance. I mean, it's a stupid idea. So we're going to have to go to around 300 to 350 parts per million. Right? We're going to have to suck CO2 out of the atmosphere. Right? We're going to have to cut CO2, I think, emissions, right, to zero in about 20 years, by 50% in about 5 years. Right? And these numbers, to any climate expert, are saying, you are really on drugs, Paul. Right? This is like, I'd like some, but this is not going to happen. It's going to happen. It is going to happen because the alternative is collapse of civilisation, and therefore we'll find a way to do it. And that's the only way we'll do it for the reasons you're saying. Okay? It's going to be a war.
Thanks, Paul, for a very insightful lecture. My question is, we know world populations have been increasing exponentially since the early 20th century. This, together with the fact that lifespans are increasing, means that there's a larger demand on natural resources. To what extent do you think population growth impacts the global warming dynamics and equation? And should we take steps as a world to curtail this growth or allow economies of scale to take effect in 50 or 100 years' time?
So, back to the kind of equation, very big problem, times 50% increase for population, times 300% increase for economic growth. So that in many ways sums it up. Right? If you really work incredibly hard at population growth reduction, you might get that 50% increase to be 30% if you had an extraordinarily unbelievable success rate, because we're already here making babies. This is not 100 years away, right? And sex is very, very hard to control, and birth control is easier, right? But it's still very hard to apply in a system like that. And so an exceptionally good result would be going from 50% to 30% growth. Per capita income is 300% growth. Right, so in terms of scale, population just doesn't rate compared to economic growth. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have programs to encourage population controls. But I've got 5 kids now, so I'm happy for them to be applied now. But I'm breeding environmentalists, that's different. Right, so I'm allowed to have them. It's okay, I'm doing good. So seriously, population will not have much impact, and it's very hard to fix. Now, we might fix it, right, indirectly by famine, much more serious pandemics, right? I mean, we may fix it in that way, but that's not something we should plan to do.
Thank you. Particularly the early part of your talk was a pleasure to hear somebody standing up and speaking the bloody obvious. Anybody who comes from a family who ran farms that ran stock always knew, you never doubted that there's a limit to what you can feed. Incidentally, the broadacre farming is going to die as well. I think you're wildly over-optimistic in how you see things going. I don't think it will go that way, but that's a side issue. And the thing that you mentioned but skipped over, was the fact that in the turmoil that is undoubtedly coming, there's going to be millions or hundreds of millions dead. That in itself is going to be a great part of solving the problem.
Look, I think it's a valid point. And the issue there is that I don't know what this future looks like. I think we could lose billions rather than hundreds of millions, by the way. I mean, my view of the future, you don't emphasise that because it ruins the day, but it is like we can genuinely lose 1 billion or 2 people. It's completely imaginable in terms of famine. That, to me, is not going to solve the problem, though, because the economic growth and consumption is the issue. Right? That will buy us time. Right? And it's a really interesting idea because a lot of people believe that that's what's going to happen. Right? I mean, it's almost like we're planning for that to happen. That's a lot of suffering, right, to go through unnecessarily. Right? And we don't need to go through it and we can avoid it, but we are going into that world, which I call, the climate war or the 1 degree war in my case, that's what this is about. We're going to be at war on this issue. Right? This is going to be the dot-com boom with military support, and it's going to be like that. And it could easily be that ugly, but it may not be. We just don't know. We really don't know that question, that answer.
Paul, thank you for an inspiring talk tonight. I want to be a little practical. I was privileged enough to attend the 2020 summit, and I saw the coal industry in action and the disproportionate amount of power that the coal industry wields in this society. You've talked about the causes. Well, I think we all know that coal-fired generation of energy is one of the major causes. Do you have any practical suggestions about how we as individuals can take on the coal industry? And do you have any concept of a time frame in which we will be able to reverse the enormous amount of power that they are currently wielding politically in this country?
So I think thank you. This is one of my favourite topics. I wasn't going to cover it, so thank you. Is coal? I mean, one of the great things that Greenpeace has done in recent years is to, like a bull terrier, just demonise coal. Right? And everyone says they're unrealistic and it's not practical and we've got so much coal and we're going to burn it, blah, blah, blah. Rubbish. Right? The coal solution is very, very simple. And this is the campaign that we need to run. Right? We need to say to the world, we've got a lot of coal. Right? And you are most welcome to buy it. Right? On the same terms as we sell our uranium. Right? You can have our uranium for nuclear power stations if you promise not to build bombs. Right? Unless you don't promise it, like India, in which case we'll give it to you anyway. That's another story. But the point is that we have to have some criteria against selling our coal to people only if it's going to be used not to kill us. Right? Which is what it's being used for now, to kill us and to kill our barrier reef and to kill our society. So we should only be selling coal to people who don't use it that way, which of course means, I think within a decade, we should say, this is Guy Pearce's argument, by the way, which I think is well put in his piece in the quarterly essay, is give them 10 years, because it is a big industry and it takes a while to transition. 10 years, as of this date, you cannot export coal to any country that's using it unless it's going into a coal plant with carbon capture and storage, which of course there won't be any. Right? But if they believe it, if they genuinely believe it, they are most welcome and they can have our coal. If they don't believe that, then we're not going to sell the coal anymore. Because it's like pig iron Bob, right? Just give the Japanese steel to make bombs to kill us. This is just stupid. I mean, it's really stupid. And unless we call the big... See, it's like this sort of the big Goebbels thing, right? It's the big lie of coal. It's actually not an important part of our economy. It doesn't create many jobs. More people work in McDonald's than work in the coal mining industry. And get out of that. And McDonald's does a lot less damage than the coal industry, relatively speaking. So I think that really important is to call the crap on the issue and be really clear of what needs to happen with a practical solution and say sorry about the jobs, really sorry about the jobs. We're going to have to work on that and find different solutions for it, but we can't have those jobs anymore. And fortunately there aren't many of them, which is not very consoling if you're one of them, by the way, in a real sense. So we've got to think about that carefully. But then we've got to build the green energy future instead. And there are lots of jobs in that area. Yeah? Okay, last question.
You said that we need to return to kind of an age of meaning in which we kind of appreciate relationships, and philosophers have referred to it as an age of authenticity. But how does that kind of philosophy, or how does that become ingrained culturally? Does that become ingrained through an ideology, or do we use the techniques of marketing, that psychological manipulation? Do we use those techniques that have been used to market to people, to consume, to adopt this philosophy?
Yes. I'll be quick, I want to take one more question quickly. But yes, because we have to not be moralising, you are evil, you shoppers, right? We want you to be happy. We want you all to be happy. And buying shit doesn't make you happy. Right? Do this instead, and you'll be happier. And let's explain to you why it'll make you happier. So it does require, I wouldn't call it manipulation because we're doing it, not the bad guys, so it's very different. It is about marketing, right, the idea of happiness is a good thing to have, right, and more work and more time away from your friends and family and more stuff isn't going to work for you. This is going to work for you. So yes, we are going to have to engage those skill sets to do that.
Paul, two-part question around the issue of justice. The first part, you said you made a comment about you think we've got all the technology here today, and it reminded me of listening to a talk recently on Public Affairs Network from ANU, a professor of chemistry, talking about the issue of energy requirements of the global population and how the majority of the world doesn't actually have grid connections. So even if we did all the renewable stuff and everything else, we couldn't get energy to them. And so he was focusing on the need to be able to split water, artificial photosynthesis, as a key technology to be able to meet the energy demands you have for a growing population and so forth. So I would question the role of new technology, and I think that's important for justice. And I also wonder then about your comments about how things are going to evolve. Today we already have a lot of injustice. We think of the tribal heritage of humanity, and we're now starting to think of ourselves as the tribe of the earth. But I do wonder how it's going to evolve, and as you say, the disruption. Are we going to come out of this with a lot more inequity or equity? I mean, in the worst case, as you said, if billions die, will there be a few other billion that are still stuck in extreme poverty, or will we figure out a way of actually coming out of this for a bit more equity in place? Yeah.
So I think first part, we're going to have lots more technology, lots of excellent technology, amazing stuff to make it spread around better. We don't need it, is my point. We can deal with those issues with today's technology. In developing countries, off-grid systems, we have all that sorted out. We could do it today. We've got to pay more for it, we can do it today. It will get cheaper, so that's okay. We can make it better, and we'll do that. I think we are going to evolve as a species, right? And I think we are going to evolve, and we're going to address poverty, right? Because if we don't address poverty, we can't fix this problem, right? So we're not going to fix poverty because we decided that it's a nice thing to do. We're going to fix poverty because if the Chinese and the Indians don't come out of poverty, they're going to kill us all via climate change. And so we're going to have to find a solution that engages them, and we're going to have to give up wealth, which doesn't work for us anyway, to them for that until we work out a better, more sustainable global economic model. So we're going to have to do that, and we'll do it, I believe. Now, notwithstanding the point about I'm too optimistic, I've tried being pessimistic. It's a crap place to live. So, there is other quote I heard recently was pessimists are often right, but only optimists change the world, which I think is a really important point. Right? Things do go wrong, but Barack Obama, optimism and hope is what engages people. So it's very effective as a strategy. It's also the only thing that actually has ever worked in history to drive change. So I actually believe it is going to get incredibly ugly. We are going to see the worst of humanity come up. We are going to see the conflicts we talked about before. We're going to see conflict between and within nations and greed, and then the barriers go up. All that's going to happen, right? And lots of people are going to die in the process. But in the end, we are going to recognise because of that we are going to fix it, and we are going to fix poverty as a result, because it's a cancer on our soul. It's like the Great Apology in Australia. We cannot have a society where some people buy personal jets and some people can't eat. Right? That is just not okay. And we know it's not okay, which is why we don't want to talk about it. Right? So we're going to fix that because we know how to fix that. Thank you.